Terry Donaldson, and I'm pleased to be able to come up and share my vision of St. Francis with all of you. It's not an easy thing to do. My vision of St. Francis is that we'll be a community individually and as a congregation that will walk the walk that Jesus would want us to take, as well as to talk the talk. And I think each one of us needs to ask ourselves individually and as a community, have we done that since this crisis started? For me, the answer is no. I grew up in a Methodist church, a multi-generational family of Methodists that were active. I went to church and Sunday school every Sunday until I left for college. And I made a vow to myself that I would never, ever set foot in a Methodist church again. And I went over 50 years, and the only time I set foot in a Methodist church was when my mother died, until I came here. I came here not because St. Francis was a Methodist church, but in spite of the fact that it was Methodist. My spouse, Adema, and I were looking for a place to have our marriage ceremony. We didn't want to go to a justice of the peace with a swarm of people. And we looked in a guide called the Pride Guide that advertised services and goods for people in the LGBT community. There were two churches in Tucson that had the courage to advertise that they would do marriages for people that were gay or lesbian. One was St. Francis, the other was Grace St. Paul Episcopal Church. There were no other Methodist churches listed, or any other churches at all. Two, in a city of this size. Pathetic. I had heard some good things about St. Francis from a coworker, and that's why we chose to come here. But before we did, because of my history with the Methodist Church, we came up and met with Jim first, and we were pleased with the reception we got. We had our ceremony in his office, and after that, Ademar felt that we needed a spiritual community, and we started coming to church here. And I remember the first service, the first song was the Raggedy Band. They would have never sang that in the church that I grew up in, ever. And none of the people, or most of the people spoken of in that song would not have been welcome in that church under any circumstances, because it was a bigoted church. Let's not mince words here. Bigot is bigot, and prejudice is prejudice. It is not traditional. It is not tradition. If you think that what the United Methodist Church has done can call itself the traditional Methodist Church, you are grossly and sadly mistaken. There is nothing traditional about bigotry and prejudice. And when somebody stands up in front of you, either in a private conversation, a meeting, or in church, and refers to that as the traditional Methodist Church, call them out on it, because that is not tradition. Having turkey and Thanksgiving is tradition, a Christmas tree is tradition. Bigotry and prejudice is not tradition. And if it is, if you think it is, then ask yourself, Why did I join a church that has a tradition of bigotry and prejudice? I don't think you did. We need to take action. We need to be a church of action. We're good at saying hallelujahs. We're good at hearing about conferences, about meetings. Let's walk the walk. What is walking the walk? Well, I'm going to give you some examples. We need to ask questions. Where is this church going and when? What is the timeline? We need to call people out when they say that that is the traditional Methodist Church. No, it is the bigoted and prejudiced Methodist Church, and we are not a part of that. We are St. Francis, and we need to stand up for who we are and take action.
Thanks so much, Terry. I'm Joe Patanzo. Before I start, I want to give a special thanks to the speaker we had just a couple of weeks ago, J.J. Ward, for sharing his hope and courage and giving me the courage to stand up here this morning and share some of my thoughts and ideas with you. We are living in an extraordinary times. I've never witnessed a more polarized time, not only in American culture, but in fact globally. The disparity between right and wrong, in my opinion, left and right, is in fact the hardest part I've ever experienced in my life. And speaking recently with our pastor Jim, he suggested that there are in fact great or long cycles in cultural development, perhaps 500 or even 1,000-year cycles. Think of that. Think of the major advances in just the past 200 plus years in America, the establishment of our democracy, the vote for all Americans regardless of race, religion, or gender, the civil rights that many of us fought and protested for in the 60s. And in each and every single case, with each major development, there was a price tag. Physical, spiritual, and emotional casualties. I believe in evil. Two kinds. Small evil, where the person or group who creates the framework for those things we hold with disdain. By example, separating families of immigrants seeking asylum, profound wage injustice, race, gender-based wage discrimination, and a group that promoted and voted for the abomination called the Traditional Plan at the General Conference of the Methodist Church in February. Those are small evils. Why? Because we still have a move left on the board. There's something we can do about those. In Roy Cooney's song, Do Not Fear to Hope. Do not fear to hope, though the wicked rage and rise. Our God sees not as we see. Success is not the prize. Do not fear to hope, for though the night be long, and a long night indeed it is, the race shall not be to the swift, the fight not to the strong. We, guided by the Spirit, can counter and overcome that kind of evil. Collectively, we can be in the presence of Christ, continuing the mission of Jesus and being that presence in the world today. With the hope of conversion, we're all embraced doing the next right thing, kind of a simple concept. And yet during the interim, we, guided by the Spirit, leap into action, being counter to that prevailing culture, and provide that interim solution. We provide food for those oppressed that are being starved by a system without empathy and concern. We help shelter the homeless displaced by greed. We provide medicine for those sick and dying at the hands of profiteering pharmaceutical mongers. And the list goes on and on. So hold that idea of social justice, because it's a very big part of my vision for this new church. I believe that we're at war. In his book, The People of the Lie, Scott Peck makes the case for incarnate evil in the world. Peck, a psychiatrist, talks about the struggles of demons within the human condition. While Peck believes that true evil is real and does exist, I kind of agree with Terry. I concur that it's a part of our history, but not a part of our tradition. We can acknowledge Auschwitz as a part of our history, but it's not a part of the human tradition at all. That rare but real kind of incarnate evil will be defeated completely in the future kingdom. We're simply out of our weight class on that one. It's kind of like in the movie The Exorcist. It's Father Dean and Ferris against Reagan. He was outnumbered. So in part today, my vision for a new church, I will be speaking of the internal which manifested in the external reality. The General Conference decision was a very real representation of the collective inner demons of humanity run amok. Born of fear, with that ever-present fight or flight survival response gone awry, totally off the rails. Fear of that which is different than self, when we can't understand, when it looks different outside of our comfort range, when the things that they like to do and say don't speak to who I am as a person. When an idea of intimacy is so very different from mine that it challenges the most vulnerable sense of right and wrong at the core of my being. Is that enough said? None of us in this room has managed to avoid dark interior moments in our life. Those places of regret, fear, isolation, loneliness, abandonment, anger, and war. I'm just assuming that you've had those because I am. In most moments we are happy, and happy still not to look at the things I'm talking about, the things that create a framework for us to commit spiritual malpractice. Make no mistake, we're at war. So while my vision for a new church is very much composed of a pilgrim people whose journey is grounded in ongoing conversion, where fear, anxiety, resentment, anger, loneliness are words that we have forgotten. It's also very much about embracing John's vision of an out kingdom, where love, justice, and peace prevail, where all are welcome, where no one walks alone, where it's God's grace, love, and peace prevail for all. Thanks.
And I'm Judy Robinson, and I don't see myself as a visionary by any stretch. In fact, that temptation to look backward and relax in the glory of who we've been is always there. I do read a lot, and sometimes ideas stick for whatever reasons. Last fall, I forced myself to read a dystopian novel, not my favorite genre, the point of which was never clear to me. But the protagonist's name for God was change. God as change. The other word for God that has been making sense to me is more. Change and more. Not as commands or demands, but as invitations to stretch and grow and become. Brian McCarran is the author who gave us Corey and the Seventh Story that we used during Lent. In his earlier book, The Great Spiritual Migration, he listed in an appendix 14 precepts for a just and generous Christianity, which he acknowledges he stole from Thich Nhat Hanh. I'd like to share those with you as foundational to our emerging church, but certainly as stepping stones in the right direction. And my perspective is that if there's going to be a new church, there has to be a new lead. And so some of these are very internal and specific, but they also need community in order to happen. Number one, humility. Do not be idolatrous about any doctrine, theory, belief, or ideology, even Christian ones. Christian systems of thought or belief are guiding means, a pathway rather than a destination. 2, lifelong learning. Do not think the knowledge you presently possess is changeless complete, and absolute truth. Avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. Be open to the Holy Spirit and practice childlike humility, demonstrating curiosity about others' viewpoints. Truth is found in life and not merely in conceptual knowledge. Gentleness. Do not force others, including children, by any means whatsoever, to adopt your views, whether by authority, threat, money, propaganda, or even education. However, through compassionate dialogue, help others renounce fanaticism and narrow-mindedness, and be ready to gently and humbly share what gives you life whenever it's appropriate. Compassion. Do not avoid suffering or close your eyes before suffering. Do not lose awareness of the existence of suffering in the life of the world. Find ways to be with those who are suffering and to be an agent of comfort and healing. Awaken yourself to the reality of suffering in the world and do the same regarding joy, so you can weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. Generosity. Do not accumulate wealth while millions are hungry. Do not take as the aim of your life fame, profit, wealth, or sensual pleasure. Live simply and share time, energy, opportunity, and material resources with those who are in need. Love. Do not maintain anger or hatred. Learn to penetrate and transform them when they are still seeds in your consciousness. As soon as they arrive, turn your heart toward God in order to see and understand the nature of your hatred, so it will not be translated into word and deed. Make love your highest goal. Serenity. Do not lose yourself in dispersion in your surroundings. Dwell in the presence and peace of God to come back to what is happening in the present moment. Be in touch with what is wondrous, refreshing, and healing both inside and around you. Plant seeds of joy, peace, and understanding in yourself in order to facilitate the work of transformation in the depths of your consciousness. Reconciliation. Be careful with your words. Do not utter words that can create discord and cause the community to break. Communication. Do not say untruthful things for the sake of personal interest or to impress people. Do not utter words that cause division and hatred. Do not spread news that you do not know to be certain. Do not criticize or condemn things of which you are not sure. Justice. Do not use your faith community for personal gain or profit or politicize it for partisan ends. A faith community, however, should take a clear stand against oppression and injustice and should strive to change unjust and unhealthy situations without being manipulated or controlled by outside forces or interests. Vocation. Do not live with a vocation that is harmful to humans and nature. Nonviolence. Do not kill and do no harm, and do not stand by when others seek to do so. Property. Possess nothing that belongs to others. Respect the property of others, but prevent others from profiteering from human suffering or suffering of other species on earth. Body. Do not mistreat your body. Learn to treat it with respect. Practice self-control. Be aware of the ways your body connects you to all creation and be grateful for every meal, every heartbeat, and every breath. Seems to me these are good starting places for our children and adult education, for our staff, for our boards, for ministry teams, for book studies, and all small groups to wrestle with these big ideas and how to practice them. I can't do that by myself. I need your reflection, your insights, and your challenges I need you as listeners and fellow seekers. I came to St. Francis a long time ago because I was hungry to be heard, to be challenged, to be invited to grow and to try new things. We're not finished yet. I'm still eager for more and for change. And there are two quotes from someone that Jim has mentioned the last couple of weeks, Rachel Held Evans. This is what God's kingdom is like. A bunch of outcasts and oddballs gathered at a table, not because they are rich or worthy or good, but because they are hungry, because they said yes, and there's always room for more. And imagine if every church became a place where everyone is safe, but no one is comfortable. Imagine if every church became a place where we told one another the truth. We might just create sanctuary.
Good morning, my name is Dean Moore. I'm the sound guy. I am also the band director at Tucson High School. So these are my kids. I'm on the left side. Before I get rolling here, a couple people talked about tradition. The principal at my school, who is a half black, half Hispanic woman, by the way, said about Tucson High, we're a very old school, that tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. My short history, even though I'm a member of St. Francis, I don't identify as Methodist, and I'm only vaguely Christian in general. Today I have 2 points I want to share with you, some perspective and a path forward. I have bad news. We're old. At St. Francis, there are times when I'm the youngest person in the room, and I'm 40. This is not uniquely a St. Francis problem. Many churches have this problem. The perspective I want to share is that of the younger generation. People who are sometimes the new kids in Congress, and definitely the kids who will be voting in the next election. It's easy to view people born in the 21st century as addicted to their cell phones. Self-absorbed, never talking to anyone. But of course, this hasn't changed. The black and white era wasn't any better. Maybe we need to go way back. Just look at that. Not a cell phone in sight. Everyone together just living in the moment of a public execution. But these times are different. There have been articles written about millennials destroying things, like Applebee's and Kmart. They are less likely to own a home. My favorite article is about how they've ruined a divorce, which is an interesting way to say they're more likely to stay married. And they're much less likely to attend church. Why is that important? Teachers are trained that we must prepare students for their future, not our past. If you're not a teacher, think of it as a parent. We cannot raise our kids the same way our parents raised us. Our parents raised us for a world that no longer exists. We don't teach kids to read analog clocks in school because everything's digital. Some schools don't even teach cursive handwriting because everything's typed. And these kids don't need church the way that their parents or their grandparents may have. I teach marching band. My 120 kids are with me much more than other teachers. Late nights, weekends, weeks in the summer, trips to Disneyland. I get to know these kids really well. They are in clubs and activities. They are socially active, independent of any church. They have grown up in a world integrated more than it has ever been. They have gay friends. Some of them are gay, openly or not. I had one transgender student last year. Before every major performance, I give them an inspirational pep talk. Before our final marching band competition last year, I read the poem that Marshall read at Ron Holland's memorial. The one that goes, "Our greatest fear is not that we are powerless. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And it goes on from there. I told him where I heard it, and when I said the words, "his husband," no one blinked. They're not perfect. Some need molding. But on average, they are way past the problems that the UMC is dealing with now. They are, however, very aware of the social issues coming from the church. 2 years ago, I took the band to downtown Los Angeles, and one of our stops was at the Cathedral of Our Lady of Angels. One of the students asked to leave the building. Even though there was no service at the time, and we were just looking at artwork and architecture, he didn't feel comfortable because of his past experience with the church. I have no problem living in a world run by my students. We like to think that we use our faith to create a better world, but what type of world will they grow up in? One in which they will flourish, or one that they need to fix? Are we using the institution of the UMC to create a world for their future or our past? Where do we go from here? We cannot allow the vision of St. Francis in the foothills to be blurred by our affiliation with a bigoted, corporatized faith. Because bigotry in the name of religion is still bigotry. When teachers are taught about classroom management, we are told, what you tolerate, you encourage. Are we going to tolerate this? And are we going to let this be the defining characteristic of our church? I've been playing around with a fun word, heresy, which is belief or opinion contrary to orthodox religious doctrine. If we're going to be heretics, let's let it mean something. Within the last 72 hours, the Desert Southwest Conference passed a resolution in defiance of the big UMC that included the phrase, to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they represent. If we're going to be judged by the UMC, let's make it worth it. Reconciling Ministries has done amazing work over the years, and the timing of our declaration of inclusivity, of course, lines up with what happened at General Conference, so that's why we're talking about it now. But what else can we do? Where's our voting rights outreach? Where's our Black Lives Matter Ministry Council? What is our plan for youth and families? We could expand our focus without diminishing Reconciling Ministries and truly change our community for the better if we want to. We have the resources. We just need to decide to use them. As a teacher, sometimes to make a point, we have to use an extreme example, a huge exaggeration just to make sure everyone gets the idea. Here's mine for today. In Germany in the 1930s and 40s, there were people who saw the rise of the Nazi Party, but sat by. Maybe they thought the new policies were a bit harsh, but hey, the trains ran on time. They didn't want to cause too much trouble, so they just went along to get along. Today, in retrospect, we have a name for these people. We call them Nazis. No one cares what they did at the time. They tolerated the behavior of that government, thus encouraging it. Are we going to be good Methodists who go along with the UMC? Will we say, we're Methodist, but we're not that Methodist? Are we going to pay our dues and go along with them with other issues to prevent being scolded by the bishop? I don't know if they're good. The Methodist Church comprises tens of millions of people. We can't pretend this doesn't matter. Do we really want to be the Neville Chamberlain in this story? The United Methodist Church must reverse its decision quickly. If it doesn't, and we remain part of the UMC, then we are encouraging such behavior by tolerating it. And if we tolerate it, there's no reason to believe we have a place in modern society for my students or my family.
Yeah, that's fine.